rates are making some moves, but behind the scenes, there's some details about what might be happening to home prices. We'll talk about that in a minute, but briefly, we're going to take a look at our old friend, electric vehicles, right? EVs. People want to know, is this something to need to worry about? Well, there's more and more evidence that EVs may not be all they're cracked up to be. EVs are running out of customers, according to the article, and some dealers don't want anymore. Right? EVs at one point was everybody wants an EV, all the dealers need to stock them. Well, right now, there's dealers that are turning them away from the factory because no one's buying them, even with the incentives and with all the push to maybe call them cheaper. There's still people that can't find places to charge them. They're worried about whether or not the batteries are going to last that long. It's a pretty significant pushback from the marketplace. Also, another thing that just came up, you see this article here, it says plenty of arguments are being voiced against battery electric vehicles, right? People saying, well, it's not really going to reduce global warming, infrastructure, but there's a new thing that's happening. Warns of worsening road conditions. These vehicles are heavier than the average gasoline vehicle. They weigh more. And that weight is a low center of gravity because the battery's at the bottom. What they're finding is it's damaging roads. Now, this is in the UK, Great Britain, but roads and cars any different over there? I mean, the laws of physics pretty much apply anywhere. So they're saying that residential roads were not engineered for heavy vehicles will develop a greater number of potholes, which means they need to be fixed more. Stress on road surfaces becomes greater, causes greater movement of asphalt, which causes cracks. And if they're not fixed, changing temperatures develop into potholes. So at the same time that they're losing money on road tax from gas tax, when you buy gasoline at the gas pump for a normal car, part of that money goes to pay for taxes for the roads. EVs don't pay that tax. So the EVs are using the roads more, but they're not paying for them as much. Right? So that's something that might become an issue at some point. So I know this is the most important thing people want to talk about is real estate. So let's just jump right in. First, it's mortgage rates. I'm sure you've heard by now, mortgage rates jumped up again. How much? Well, they're up well over 7.23. Actually, right now, there's most of the rates for most mortgages are about 7.4. Highest since 2001. That's more than 20 years ago. So what does that mean? Well, the first obvious answer, it means your mortgage payment is going to be higher. If you buy a house for $400,000, you have a mortgage rate of 7.4, it's going to be higher than if you bought a house for the same price and your mortgage rate was 4.5. It's simple math. The bigger picture is, what does that mean for the housing market? In a normal supply and demand type economy, you would say, well, if the mortgage rates go up, then house prices have to go down. Well, not really. The mortgage rates are causing two other problems which offset the price of the house. Number one is it's making it less likely that current owners are going to sell their house. Anybody who has a house right now has a mortgage rate less than 7.23. Everybody does that has a house right now. If you have a house right now, you either bought it in the last 10 years, so your mortgage rate is less than probably 4% or 5%. Maybe you bought it longer than that and you had a higher rate, but you probably refinanced it. Or you might have a house that has no mortgage, it's paid off. So if you're going to be looking at having to get a 7.23 rate on your new house, you're probably not going to sell your old house. Probably not going to happen, right? So there's less houses on the market. At the same time, it's also creating a slowdown in building. One of the only saving graces for the real estate market was builders were actually building homes. The home building market was off the charts. Builders, contractors, developers were building houses. Now they're starting to pull back. They're saying, well, if the rates are this high, maybe people won't buy as many houses. So they're starting to pull back. Even if they kept building, they still couldn't keep up with the demand. The demand for homes was already way more than what was out there. The estimates, we've talked about it before. that there were 4 or 5 million fewer homes in the market that were needed to fulfill the demand for houses. So this is going to make that worse. So here's the question. How high a rate can housing take? Home builders are thriving despite mortgage rates, but homeowners might have less to celebrate if they persist. This begs the question. Now, this was at the same time the mortgage rate jumped up. Another disconnect is the value of many Americans' asset has held up, even when rates jumped up from 3 to 4 to 5 to 7, almost 8. And we'll talk about where it's going to go next year in a minute. The home values stayed the same. Home prices didn't crash. Everybody was expecting that home prices were going to crash. We're going to have a housing bubble. And the only piece of data that people were using to predict the housing crash was, well, they went up in the early 2000s and then crashed. So they went up in 2022, so they must crash again. You can't model a future event based on a past event if there's different variables. The variables that are different now are in 2005, let's say, there was way too many houses. There were more houses than were needed for the current population. Number two, mortgage underwriting was stupid. They would give mortgages to anybody, even if you couldn't afford it. And people were taking advantage of it. They were buying homes that they couldn't really afford. So when the housing market crashed or the economy crashed, people couldn't afford their homes. They had to get rid of them. So that put a little bit more of a glut of homes in the market. Well, that happened in 2008. Builders stopped building. All those houses were absorbed. Look, that was 15 years ago. In 15 years, the market stabilized. In fact, it didn't take 15 years. It took about 5 years. By 2012, prices were right back up where they were. That crash that happened in 2008 and 9, the prices were right back up where they were before that 3-4 years later, 2012, 2013. So you can't model what's going to happen now. Everybody's predicting a crash in real estate. It hasn't happened yet. If it hasn't happened yet, it's probably not going to happen. Surge in borrowing costs, we know about that. The other historical fact about interest rates is up until maybe the 90s, an 8% interest rate was considered good. In the 70s, 80s, beginning of the 90s, there were rates that were over 10%. If you got an 8% rate, man, you were in good shape. Now, people think 8% is high. Historically, it's normal to have an 8% rate because of the cost of borrowing, how much money really costs. What is it having an effect? Well, home sales are falling. Now, remember, that doesn't mean that home prices are falling. It means that the sale of homes is falling. Less homes are being sold. Two factors are affecting that. Inventory availability. That's really the big factor. There are some homes available, but the ones that are available, we call left-handed houses. They're houses that are not the most desirable houses. When a very desirable, properly priced house comes into the marketplace, it gets sold. People aren't willing to pay the high rate and higher price for a house that maybe needs some work or maybe is in a bad area. So the inventory is the problem. Good inventory sells quickly. Ask any realtor. If you have a nice house, good condition, good curb appeal, nice area, and it's priced well, doesn't mean you have to give it away. As long as it's priced properly for the market, it's going to sell. Ask a realtor, right? But existing home sales fell. It's because of the number of homes for sale. Look, if you had a store that was selling, I don't know, maybe let's say the new Xbox comes out, right? And there's a new Xbox, 6.0, whatever it is. And when Xbox 5 were out, they were selling, let's say, 20 a day at the store. Now they get rid of Xbox 5, they come out with Xbox 6, and they give the store 3 a day to sell. Well, you're only going to sell 3 a day. You can't say that, well, sales dropped on the new model because there were none to sell. That's what's happening with real estate. Some of it has to do with the interest rate, but really what the interest rate's doing is keeping people that have nice homes from selling their home. The interest rate, what they call mortgage rate, is a factor, but it's less of a factor for the buyer as it is for the seller. The seller does not want to sell a nice house. As we've talked about before, our strategy is always look at our website, Homes Cheap, buy the cheapest house you can stand. May not be a dream house, but whatever you can stand, buy the cheapest one because home prices are going up and interest rates are going up. Barbara Corcoran, self-made millionaire, says home prices won't fall, could jump 10 to 15% if mortgage rates dip. She's right. She's half right. Home prices will jump 10 to 15%, but mortgage rates won't dip. Mortgage rates are probably going to go, our prediction, bookmark this, check back in 2026 or 25, a couple years from now. They're going to go up to 9.6. They won't break 10 more than likely, but they'll be close and maybe settle and hover in about 9.2. That's where mortgage rates are that's going to be the new normal. That'll happen probably over the next year and a half, 2 years. During that time, home prices will go up about 5 to 6% per year. So if you count 2 years from now, 6% per year times 2 years, that's 12%. That's between 10 and 15%. That's perfect. That's exactly what she's saying. It's going to happen in spite of rates going up, not because they went down. There may be some intermittent, ups and downs with the interest rates. Look, nobody has a crystal ball. Don't believe what I say. Just look at it as one example of an opinion. So all it is an opinion, but it's based on the realities of the marketplace and the mechanisms behind it. Interest rates on mortgages are largely affected by the government changing the discount rate for the Federal Reserve Bank. And they do that to try to change the economy. They want to boost it. They want to slow it down. There's still some inflation in the economy that they want to knock down a little bit. But on the other hand, you don't want to chop it down too much because then home prices go down. So they're playing a dangerous game. But in reality, in order to have the lending industry be sustainable, you have to have rates at about the 8.5 to 8.8% range. Otherwise, lending is not sustainable. And so they can fudge it a little bit, but you can't go too far off the reservation. So that being said, place your bets accordingly. Check out Homes Cheap. We don't sell real estate. This website doesn't make any profit for us. It's just a way to show you that there are homes available in the 200,000 range, 220, 240, 250, 270 that are perfectly fine. Again, they're not a dream house, but they exist everywhere. They're on coastal cities, in the mountains. Some have large acreage, some are big square footage. You can find a house. You just have to get over the cosmetic. Oh, gee, this house has old wallpaper. We need to change the floors. You can always do that later. Plus, if you do that later from your savings or from your income, you're not paying interest on it, right? You're only paying interest on what you borrow. So if over the course of the next year and a half, you save up $200 or $300 a month, you save up $3,000, let's say, and you use that money to redo your floor. Now that floor you own for cash. It's not mortgaged. If you buy a turnkey house already reconditioned and instead of spending $275, you spend $475. Well, now that extra $200, you're paying 8%, 9% interest on. Where if you buy a house for $275 that needs some work, you do $3,000 for the floors here, you do $4,000 for maybe new appliances, maybe you do a new kitchen, and you do that over the next 4 or 5 years, it might cost you $30,000. But that $30,000 is going to take your $275 house and make it a $400 house or whatever the appreciation is. And the money that the value is increased is not going to be on a debt that you're paying interest on. You just have to live with yourself for a few years, living in a house that's maybe a little more dingy than you want. And you're going to have to be able to be okay with your friends coming over and you don't have marble countertops, right? But financially, great idea. Just an opinion. I'm sure you have your own opinion about it and about the EVs. Let us know in the comments what your opinion is. We are always glad to hear them. So it helps us pick out the next subject for videos. And make sure you subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Describe.tv is our YouTube channel. We're also on Rumble, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Describe.tv. You can go to that website and get more information there.